So we are in week 3 of Firestarter, and last week Krista did a great job with her message. If you were here, you got to experience it. If you weren't here, you should definitely watch it online. She did an awesome job, and so that was, I'm actually gonna go back and watch it a second time and do that. But today we're in our third part of this series talking about tenacity, and the title of today's message is Fight For It. And we're gonna talk about fighting, and you know, it's going to be kind of awkward for some of you because you've probably never gotten in a fight, and that's totally cool. Me, on the other hand, I've definitely been in a fight or two and decided I believe in it so much that I'll tattoo it on the inside of my arm just because that's who I am. So Fight For It is what we're talking about today, and I think most of you know, but I was born here, right, and grew up or born in the Bronx, but I moved a lot as a kid. And we moved into a lot of, not just houses, but between states. I moved from the Bronx, New York, to a place called Reading, Pennsylvania, which is about 45 minutes to an hour outside of Philadelphia. Spent some time there, then moved from there to Daytona Beach, Florida. And of course, you know, when you move so much as a kid, maybe you felt this way in your own childhood, but when you're like constantly making new friends, there's a part of you that feels like you have to kind of defend yourself in a way. Like, not necessarily like in a fist fight, but like defend like your heart. Like, because you're like, oh, I don't know if I can trust these people yet. I don't know if, you know, I want to trust them. You know, that whole process that you go through emotionally as a kid. And so, you know, going in that, like moving and all these different things, I experienced that quite a bit. And, you know, inevitably people would do things or say things. And then there's this other side of like, not where you just have to like kind of guard yourself, but then you also have this other element where you feel like you need to prove yourself. So on the one hand, you're guarding yourself. On the other hand, you're proving yourself. And for me, a lot of that proving myself came in the context of like sports. Like I love sports, and so it was like, you know, basketball and football and baseball, and those were the things that like I grew up doing and I was a part of and I loved. And so when you're changing teams, you kind of have to earn like your spot on the team. And you know, when you're changing schools, if you're, you know, who's the top dog or who's the best at this sport or that sport, and so you kind of like trying to figure out like jockeying for position on like where you at like on the totem pole. And so all of that was part of like my childhood. And then inevitably there were some things that led to like actual fistfights that were also part of my childhood because you had to guard yourself and prove yourself. But no matter where I lived, whether it was in New York or whether it was in Reading or whether it was in Daytona, you know, I realized for me, like there was a lot of things that could be said about me. There was a lot of things that could be done to me or done against me. But one of the things that like I refused to be like allowed or like was never willing to accept or allow for someone to even have a reason to say this about me, was that I was soft. S-O-F-T. Like, that I was soft. Like, there was no way, like, anyone was gonna say I was soft. Like, we play basketball, I'd be like, all right, call your own fouls. I never called a foul. Because I was like, I don't care. Like, I'm gonna get back up, I'm gonna tough it out. Like, someone hits me, like, they're gonna have to hit me so hard that they feel bad about it, and they're gonna call the foul for me. Because, like, when you're playing, like, you don't want that reputation. Like, you don't want, like, oh, well, you know, he's soft. Like, he's a cupcake. He's going to be easy. Like, he's going to be, you know, like, and that's what that word soft meant. It was like, you know, that you didn't have any sort of resilience. Yeah. That, you know, like you were like, you know, just kind of a pushover. Yeah. That you were, you know, someone who could, you know, be taken advantage of. Yeah. And there was just no way that I was going to let anyone do that. In fact, if someone did that, literally, it was going to result in a fist fight. Yeah. And I'm going to tell them, like, you're going to get hit at least once. And you're going to know it's not a soft punch. Like, it's coming for you hot and quick, and you probably won't even realize it. But I dare you to call me soft. And that was my mindset, was like this mentality of like, I'm gonna be tough. Like, and I'm gonna fight through this stuff, and I'm gonna like push through any sort of like, you know, physical endearment. I mean, this isn't, again, like a pat myself on the back or like, wow, he's really tough. Like, but legit, we would play tackle football on concrete streets. Like, that's how we would play. Like, and there wasn't any like, oh, wait, let me just kind of like run out of bounds. It was like, no, like I'm gonna truck somebody because I'm not gonna let them hit me on the asphalt. And like, that's how, like that was my mindset. Maybe I'm like kind of weird and sadistic or whatever. Like maybe I like a pain a little bit too much, but like that was the thing. And what's weird about all of this was that like I was born in 1986, so I'm not that much older than like a lot of the people I'm about to talk about, but my childhood took place in the 90s and even into the early part of the 2000s. Yet what's weird to me and astonishing to me was that I wasn't the only one who refused to be called soft. Like most of my peers were that same way. Occasionally you had someone who was, quote, soft, but they were the exception. the rule was, no, like you're going to be tough. And then in a weird set of events or like over a period of time, I guess, what's been interesting to me is that like soft has become like now not just acceptable, but maybe even cool. And I'm not talking about, listen, because for all the great things that have happened, like I'm talking about, there's like all this anti-bullying stuff and like there's like way more clear parameters around right and wrong. And so I'm not talking about mean. Like tough and mean are not the same thing. Mean, you can be mean all you want, but it doesn't make you tough, and you can be tough without having to be mean. And so there's a difference between those two things. And for all the things that we've learned or all the things that we've put like value on and how we treat people and how we recognize people and what we should say and what we shouldn't say and how we should approach someone and how we shouldn't approach someone, like in this process we've kind of created like this, we're averse to anything like tough. And we're so easily, like it seems like we live in this world or society where everyone feels like they're entitled to be offended over nothing. Instead of like learning to fight for what matters, we've stopped doing that and now we fight over what doesn't matter. Legit, I have a friend, she's self-employed, runs the kind of like a network marketing business, and she does great in her business. Has a ton of people that do exceptionally well, make a great living for their lives. But back last fall, she was talking about like kind of this new business goal that they had just hit and just achieved, like a high point in her business. And so she posted on social media about it to celebrate, use the fire emojis, and this is what someone wrote. I can't believe you would use the fire emojis when all these wildfires are going on in California. Quote, I'm so offended. You look at this person's profile, she lives nowhere close to California. Now, I'm not saying she's not like been to California. I'm not saying she doesn't have relatives in California. But how are you, quote, so offended over a fire emoji? But that's the world we live in, right? And like social media has like kind of like further accelerated that or like heightened it, right? Like our friend says like social media has given the village idiot a voice. And like what you realize, like there's more than one village idiot. Like either that or there's a lot of villages. But they all have a voice and they all have this like, oh, I should be offended because you did this or that. And it's like, no, like this is not how the world should operate. And that same like kind of softness, in my opinion, has permeated like the Christian faith. Like we live in this kind of like bubble where we're like afraid of like adversity or afraid of risk or afraid of challenge or afraid of like something being difficult. And it's like, oh, well, if it's not easy, then it must not be God. And it's like, well, where did that jacked up theology come from? Show me a verse. Like just one. Like just show me one. And it's not there. Yet that's the culture that we've embraced, and that's the thing. Like, and so like in this process, we feel like, oh well, if I've got to like push through something, if I've got to overcome something, then maybe God doesn't love me, or maybe God doesn't like bless me, or maybe God cares more about someone else because there's something beneficial in their life, and it looks like, from my perspective, they didn't have to do anything to get it. And so we've lost this toughness, we've lost like this resilience, we've lost our tenacity. And instead of like taking a fighting stance and say, I'm going to fight for what I want, I'm going to fight for something that's worth it, I'm going to fight to take hold of something, we've just said, oh, if I've got to fight, then I'll just kind of scoot back and, maybe someone else will get it. And it blows my mind. Over the last 5 years, I can literally count 5 different men, okay, who have gone through divorce. And the only reason they've gone through divorce is not because their divorce as they filed was, quote, irreconcilable. It was because they didn't want to fight for it. That's it. They didn't want to fight for their marriage. They could have done something. Literally, I sat across a table from a guy and said, what do you want? And he said, not this. What was his not this? Not his wife, not his marriage. His not this was to work for it. I laid out a plan. Here's what you can do to work for this. And he said, not this. I'm like, bro, how are you gonna get through anything in life? How are you gonna like move for something? I mean, I've talked to people who, are like, oh, well, I just feel like God's calling me to do this thing. I just feel like this is what I'm supposed to do. Big vision, big plans, big dreams, big aspirations, zero work. Well, I just don't get why God's not giving it to me. Because you're not doing anything. You're not trying. Why would God give you something? He needs to give you difficulty because you're a wuss. I mean, I've like sat with people like, man, I'm praying and I'm praying. Like, how long you been praying for this? Like, prayer's kind of weird. So like, I mean, I just think about it. Okay, well, how much do you think about it? Only when I don't have it. Okay, what do you do with your thoughts? I just get angry. Oh, hold up. I mean, you guys have heard me say this before. My daughter is 6.5 years old, 7 years, and for the past 5, she's been praying for a baby brother. She's 7. And she's prayed for something far longer than me or most other people have prayed for in their entire lives. In fact, most people don't even pray about it. They say, I just thought about it, and I thought God would hear my thoughts, and maybe God would do something. And so they've opted instead to walk away from God. They've opted instead to walk away from church or from community. And it's like, man, what are you doing? Like, you have to fight, because here's the thing. The reason we have to fight is because we're in a fight. Yeah. Listen, there was a big boxing match last night. And the crazy thing about this, right, was that neither boxer showed up and thought, whoa, what am I doing here? Hold on, you want to try to punch me? No, I mean, let's just play tic-tac-toe on a piece of paper and like best 2 out of 3, like that's it. No, they came to fight because they knew they were in a fight. So they took their stance. They got ready. They ducked when punches were swung. They didn't say, no, hey, ref, stop. He's trying to hit me. They swung back. They fought back. This is why Paul could write these words in Ephesians chapter 6. He said, for we are not fighting against flesh and blood enemies, but against evil rulers and authorities of the unseen world, against mighty powers in this dark world, and against evil spirits in the heavenly places. You see, we have a very real enemy whose goal is to steal, kill, and destroy. Yeah. Point blank and simple. Yeah. He wants to steal anything good you have in your life. He wants to rob you of the joy God wants to give you. He wants to rob you of the purpose placed on your life. He wants to rob you of a destiny full of potential and opportunity and significance. He wants to steal that from you. But stealing isn't good enough for him. He wants to kill. He's in it for the headshot. He's not just trying to disable or kind of cripple you or leave you just kind of by the side. He wants to kill anything good in you. He wants to kill anything significant in you. He wants to kill anything that resembles anything of God or good in your life to come. But killing's not good enough for him. He wants to destroy. He wants to shred any evidence of your existence. He wants to erase any sort of mark or legacy or impact that you have the potential or the opportunity to make. Because stealing isn't good enough, because killing isn't, he's an all-consuming enemy. We have an all-consuming God, but we also have an all-consuming enemy. And in his world, it's not good enough for you to just exist. He's not satisfied with you just kind of making it day by day. He wants to destroy anything and everything that resembles or represents God in your life or in your person. Yeah. And so Paul said, we got to fight. Yeah. Because someone's fighting us. Someone's coming up against us. And so it's our responsibility to push back. It's our responsibility to fight back. It's our responsibility to say, you know what? If I want something, if God has called me to something, if God has given me something, if God has purposed me towards something, then I need to fight for it. Yes. That's good. Because if we don't fight, nothing changes. If we don't fight, things digress and get worse. If you don't fight, any sort of semblance of who you are today will be utterly destroyed. That's why you fight. That's why you've got to fight for it. Whatever it is it a relationship in your life? Is it a marriage? Is it your job? Is it a career? Is it a purpose? Is it a significance? Whatever it is, whatever you're going to fill in that kind of bracket or in that space, you have to fight for it. And that it may be one thing today and it may be another thing tomorrow, but whatever it is, it's worth fighting for. And so what I want to do this morning is kind of take you through maybe the most recognizable passage of a fight, like the most kind of like famous passage in all of scriptures where a fight took place, and it's the fight of David and Goliath. And you know, that story is like, I was reading this story several weeks back, and it is such an epic story. And I think we often just kind of like relegate it to like, oh, it's a cute kid's story, you know, like a little slingshot and, like, got him, David, good job, bud. But this story is like BA. And if this wasn't going online, I'd probably like say the whole thing. Like it's BA. What we miss out on like kind of minimizing it or reducing it to some ancient story or to some like kind of kid's tale or like this cutesy thing with a slingshot. What we miss out is David's fierceness, like his running to the attack, his tenacity, and his fervor to fight for what mattered in his life. And so as we read through the passage, I'm not going to read the entire thing, I'll just kind of read verses and kind of talk through it. But as we read through it, what you'll find is that David demonstrated not just tenacity, but how to fight for something that matters. And what you have to fight through, more importantly, to get to what matters. Because usually, anything worthy of blessing, anything worthy of honor, anything worthy of pursuit is always going to be on the other side of your challenge, of your adversary. And so we'll start 1 Samuel 17. Here's how it goes, okay? The Philistine Goliath has already come out. He's already kind of put out a challenge before. All the people are like, freaking out, worrying about what do we do. So David, a teenage boy, says, don't worry about this Philistine. I'll go fight him. Now, I don't know what kind of school you went to. But I went to a couple of schools that were less than like standard, okay? Less than like ideal. And I had a couple friends. My dad, one of the things he taught me, he didn't teach me a lot of like great things, but one of the great things he taught me was like, find like the biggest, baddest person in school and like be friends with them. Because then when you need them, they're gonna say, hey, I'll fight them. Yeah. Oh, yeah. And he wasn't lying. So this is what I would do. I'm like, hey, let's ante up, bro. Like, we got this guy. Yeah, I'll go first. Yeah, you go first. I'm right here if you need me. Just let him. David, a teenage kid and surrounded by a military of grown men, says, I'll fight him. This is what they say back to him. Don't be ridiculous. The king, Saul. Don't be ridiculous. There's no way you can fight this Philistine and possibly win. You're only a boy, and he's been a man of war since his youth. In other words, you're just a kid. He's been killing people since he was your age. But David persisted. I've been taking care of my father's sheep and goats. They're like, what? Who cares? But listen, this is what he says. When a lion or a bear comes to steal a lamb from the flock, I go after it with a club and I rescue the lamb from its mouth. If the animal turns on me, I catch it by the jaw and club it to death. Bro, I didn't know any kids in my school that did that. Not a single one of my friends were capable of doing that. He says, I've done this to both lions, plural, and bears, plural. And I'll do it to this pagan Philistine too, for he has defied the armies of the living God. This is what David was fighting for. This guy's coming up against my God. This guy's coming up against what God has purposed for us as a nation, what God has purposed for us as a tribe, what God has purposed for me as an individual. This guy's coming up against that. Yeah, it's worth fighting for. I'm going to do it to him just like I did to that lion, just like I did to that bear. Skip down to verse 44. Now David is approaching the giant. Okay, imagine this scene because I've been in the valley of Elah where this battle took place. And the two hillsides where the tribes or the armies would have been camped against one another are probably separated by less than 3/4 of a mile. So easy, clear visibility. You can shout across the valley and hear clearly. And so on one side, you have this giant roaring and yelling, come send your best warrior against me. On the other side, you have a teenage boy running down full speed. And so they're going to meet down in this valley in front of the whole theater, in front of this whole realm of soldiers who are watching, about to observe what's going to take place. So Goliath, the giant, yells, come over here and I'll give your flesh to the birds and the wild animals. Seems like a nice guy. And David replied, you come to me with sword, spear, and javelin, but I come to you in the name of the Lord of heaven's armies. Today the Lord will conquer you, and I will kill you and cut off your head. I mean, the dude was trash talking. He's spitting some fire. He says, and then I will give the dead bodies of your men. So I'm killing you and your boys. And the birds, and I'm going to give the dead bodies to the birds and the wild animals. And the whole world will know that there's a God in Israel. And everyone assembled here will know that the Lord rescues his people, but not with sword and spear. This is the Lord's battle, and he will give you to us. As Goliath moved closer to the attack, look at what David did. David quickly ran away from him? No, ran out to meet him. I mean, this isn't a kid's story. Like, we shouldn't be reading this to, like, my 6-year-old daughter, hey, gee, he's going to cut off his head, and then the birds are just going to come pick over. Like, it's going to be like a big feast for all the animals. It's okay. This isn't a kid's story. This is savagery at its finest. This is someone who said, you know what, I don't care what's in front of me. I don't care what I have to fight against or who I have to fight against. I know what I'm fighting for is worth it. And so I'm not going to push away. I'm not going to shrink back. I'm not going to go soft all of a sudden because there's something standing in front of me that's bigger than me, that's been doing it longer than I have, that's been, ridiculing us for more than I can imagine. I'm not going to shrink back and say, you know what, nah, maybe we can send someone else. No, this is my fight to take. You may not want to fight. You may not want to fight. I don't care what you have to say because I'm going to go fight. And so David charged through that. And I think what we find, or what you'll see what I want to kind of do this morning is kind of walk through like several aspects or several layers of like what you have to fight through in order to obtain what God wants to give you. Because again, this isn't just about fighting for fighting's sake. We're not just randomly fighting. As Paul said, we have an enemy that's fighting against us. And the reason he's fighting against us is because he doesn't want us to inherit what God has promised to bring us. And so we're going to have to fight through some things in order to get to the other side of that. And so the first thing you're going to have to fight through are challenges and obstacles. Challenges and obstacles are always going to be presenting themselves whenever you're moving towards something worth obtaining. You see, we'll go back a little bit in the story to verses 10 and 11. This is Goliath screaming out, I defy the armies of Israel today. Send me a man who will fight me. And when Saul and the Israelites heard this, they were terrified and deeply shaken. You see, Goliath presented himself as a challenge. Israel was already promised by God, this is your land to take. But God didn't say, hey, the land's clear. He said, no, you're going to have to clear the land. But I will give you victory. Okay, so the word was already spoken. The deed was already done. God had made it clear to them, this is yours to take. You're going to have to fight, but you're going to win. Yet the Israelites in this moment, all of a sudden, when challenge presented itself, a big challenge, presented himself and said, I defy what God has spoken to you. I defy what God has promised. I defy what God has purposed in your life. I defy that God has planned anything good for you. When that voice spoke, the Israelites all of a sudden are like, oh my gosh, what do we do? If this verse were translated today, it would say that Saul was shook. Like he was done. He's like, I can't do anything about it. I can't face this. And the men that were with him were terrified. The men that were standing there, the ones who had been trained for battle for moments like this, had no sort of like resolve or any sort of like, if you're shook, then I'm shook. And maybe we're all shook and like, let's just stay over here on this side of the mountain and maybe he'll just leave us alone. Like all of a sudden challenge came and obstacles were presented and they acted like nothing could be done. But here's the thing, if you're going to do anything meaningful, if you're going to go after anything that God has purposed for you, it's inevitable that challenges and obstacles will present themselves. In fact, I'll go as far to say this, that if you do not have any challenges, if there are no obstacles in your life, if there are no obstacles impeding you or impeding upon your faith or kind of presenting themselves before you, then you probably actually aren't pursuing what God wanted in the first place. Because if you're not on a path toward God, why would God's adversary, Satan, the enemy, position himself in front of you? You're doing it to yourself. And so if there is no challenge, if there is no obstacle, then the question isn't, oh, well, where's God? The question is, where are you? What direction are you headed? But if there is challenge, if there is obstacle, then take heart, because you can say, yeah, I'm right on the right path. This is exactly the destiny God has me toward. And it doesn't mean things are going to resolve themselves in the way that maybe you envision, but it does mean you're on the path to get to where you need to be. And so challenge and obstacle are going to present themselves. And listen, God's greatest blessings, in my opinion, God's greatest blessings are often on the other side of our greatest obstacles. So let me ask you this question. Do you think that the closer you get to those blessings, the closer you get to those promises, the closer you get to becoming the type of person God has called you to become, do you think you would encounter more resistance or less resistance? More. Again, we know it here, we just don't believe it here. But we got to internalize it from something we can answer up here to something we believe in here. Because when we believe in here, say, yeah, like, oh, I'm on the right track. I see what this enemy's doing. I see this adversary. I see what he's trying to call out. And I see how he's trying to challenge. And I see how he's trying to provoke. But listen, all that makes me want to do is just press in. All that makes me want to do is throw another punch. All that makes me want to do is just swing harder and catch him when he's off guard, because he thinks I'm going to quit. And instead, I'm going to swing. I'll kick, I'll bite, I'll do whatever it takes. But I'm coming after it, because if he's in my way, he's going to fall like the rest of them. And David knew, man, this is exactly the path that I have to be on. Because here's the thing. People complain like, oh, well, it's not easy. And man, it's just not like, I just thought it would like make more sense than this. I just thought like if I took this job that it would lead to this position, or that it would, set me up for this, or that once I got married, like this problem will be resolved, or once we had kids, that this situation would be settled, or that once I got like into this kind of network, like that maybe things would kind of open up for me in terms of opportunity. It's just not worked out that way, and it's not easy, so it must be wrong. But the truth is, challenge and obstacles only give you greater perseverance. It was the knock against Mike Tyson, right? It's like, well, yeah, he can punch hard, but he can't last 12 rounds. Why? Because he didn't have enough challenges and obstacles in his boxing career to push him to 12 rounds. But it's the challenges and the obstacles that develop and cultivate perseverance that you need to push through and to get through onto the other side. The second level, or the second layer that you have to fight through, are resistance and opposition. Resistance and opposition. We're so quick to see the recognition that David gets, right? Oh, he beat the giant. So we're quick to see the recognition, but slow to see the resistance. From his brother to the king, they were against him. They were opposed to him. I mean, look back at like verse 33. This is what Saul said, right? Don't be ridiculous. You're being so childish. You're so immature. Haha, that's cute. There's no way you can fight this Philistine and possibly win. You're only a boy, and he's been a man of war since his youth. It's interesting to me because first his brother comes at him, and his brother says, before this scripture, his brother says, get out of here. I know your pride. You have no business being here. You just want to see the fight. David says, no, I don't want to see the fight. I want to be in the fight. The king's like, get out of here. You're just a kid. And he's like, yeah, but ain't no kids killing lions like I kill them. And it's interesting to me because I think it's a metaphor for the fact that like a lot of times our greatest resistance and our greatest opposition will be from the people that are closest to us and the people we respect the most. Yeah. For whatever reason, it tends to be that the greatest resistance, greatest opposition comes from the people in closest proximity to us. And it's not always intentional on their part. It's not always deliberate on their part. But like, oh man, you're so crazy. Like, why would you move to New York? I mean, things over here are just easier. Things are simpler over here. You could get a good job. Like, you could be close to home. All this stuff. Oh, why would you stay in that relationship, and try to work it out, or just let it run its course? I mean, it's done, it's over, let it be. Well, who do you think you are to go to New York and start a church? What makes you different? Hillsong's already there. You know who I am? What do I care about that? Is Hillsong reaching 8 million people? Because if not, then I should probably be there.
It's good.
It's good. Yeah.
Why would you do this? And these are people you love. These are people you respect. David's oldest brother, the king that David would play music for, the king that David looked up to. The person of whom it was said, man, he's killed his thousands. And these are the people opposing themselves. And I think sometimes the enemy just wants to use these people that are close to us, a family member, a friend, a parent, a husband, a wife, a boyfriend, a girlfriend, a boss, and just speak these kind of subtleties in us to make us believe that maybe we aren't cut out for what God has called us to. But if God has called you to it, you're absolutely cut out for it. And if you're not cut out for it, you better believe He's going to cut you out for it.
Yeah. Come on.
So don't let the voice of resistance or opposition weigh down. David didn't. He wasn't concerned about this. He wasn't worried about, oh man, well, what are they going to think of me? What are they? He was worried about, all right, somebody better step up. This guy's just hanging around talking. I mean, are you going to fight? No. Okay. Are you going to fight? No. Okay. Well, then somebody better. And if I die, I die. But at least I went down fighting. And that level of kind of resilience, that kind of tenacity, because here's the thing, resistance, we don't always see it this way. But you think about those people who speak out against you. You think about those people who question your ability. You think about those people who doubt your wisdom, or who doubt do you really hear from God? Are you really sure? You think about those people. And here's why I think God often uses or allows for the greatest level of resistance to come from the people in closest proximity to us. The reason why is because it leads to the greatest amount of strength. Tomorrow morning at some point I'll be in the gym. I can't promise the time, but at some point tomorrow morning I'll be in the gym. And I'll lift weights. And I've been lifting weights for, I don't know, probably 16 years, 17 years, something like that. But you know what I do? I add more weight. And my goal is to increase in weight. And you know what that does? It creates a greater level of resistance. But you know what happens when I overcome that level of resistance? It creates a greater level of strength. And so if you only had resistance or opposition from people who didn't know you or people you didn't care about, you're whatever, you just water off a duck's back, right? You just move on. But because it's the people closest to you, because it's the people you respect the most, it fortifies you, it strengthens you in a way that other stuff couldn't. But it's that resistance that's needed for that strengthening. You know what, David, I have no doubt in my mind that when David was charging that hill, he said, you know what, these guys are going to look like idiots when I do this. They're going to feel so sorry that they question me. But you know what else he felt? All right, watch me go out and prove them wrong. All right, watch. They think they know, but they're about to see. And they're about to find out what happens. And they're about to realize that when I take the fight to something, I take the fight to it, and it doesn't come back breathing. And so David went out after it. And it produced in him a strength in the face of resistance, in the face of opposition. Then the third level that you're going to have to fight through is failure and losing. Failure and losing. But wait, Ricky, I thought David beat Goliath. I thought he killed him. I thought he won, right? Didn't he win? So how is it failure and losing? And you would be right. But let me ask you this. Well, let's do this. Let's go back to verse 34. David said this, right? When a lion or a bear comes to steal a lamb from the flock, I go after it with a club and rescue the lamb from its mouth. So again, you're well, he won. He took the lion and he took the bear and he grabbed his lamb and he got it back. But if you were a shepherd and you're out in the field and you're caring for a flock of sheep, 50, 60, 70 sheep, and the lion comes and snatches your sheep, how many sheep would you have to lose before you muster the courage to go after that lion? One? One, I mean, God, that sucks. Johnny was a cutie, but we'll just have to move on without them. That's just, maybe next time I'll try a little bit harder. I'll just do my best to protect them. 2 sheep? Yeah, we lost Johnny on this date last year, and then Fluffy went. I was like, it's like, oh, man, like how many more? Like, that just sucks. 3 sheep, 5, 10. How many would it be for you? How many sheep would you have to lose where you felt sickened and tired of the fact that you weren't shepherding the way you thought you should have been shepherding? To feel the disgust within and say, I'm tired of getting taken advantage of. I'm tired of this thing coming and robbing me of what's mine with no concern, with no care, with no repercussions. How many times would you have to lose before you said enough is enough? I'm tired of feeling like a failure. I'm tired of something robbing me of what's mine. I'm tired of this thing creating doubt and insecurity within me because I'm better than this. How many times would that have to happen in your life before you decide to say, you know what, enough is enough. Today, this stuff stops. Yeah. And from this day forward, I don't care if I go down going after this lion, but this lion's going to know you mess with the wrong shepherd. See, David knew what it was like to lose. David knew what it was like to experience failure. David had no concern about whether or not, what happens if I lose? You know why? Because here's what failure and loss does for you. It breeds confidence. They say, you know what, man? I lost some sheep. But one day I decided enough was enough. So what did he tell Saul? I went after the lion. I went after the bear. And it wasn't just one lion. It wasn't just one bear. It became lions and bears. You know why? Because he had the confidence he experienced after losing. And he said, this is no longer going to stop me. This is no longer going to hold me back. In fact, it's going to give me the confidence to face my next giant, to face my next adversary, to face my next enemy. It's funny, like I posted on social media about like this commercial, right? Like this Dove Men commercial thing that I was a part of. And like I had all these people message me. I'm like, oh, you're the coolest person I know. I'm like, you better know some better people. But then I'm like, what's funny, what was ironic to me was like, that's funny, none of those people were saying that to me 5 years ago. When I was in the middle of losing. When I was in the middle of failing. When my life was falling apart. When things were crumbling and I didn't know if I was going to stay married for another 2 months, 3 months, 4 months. When I didn't know how often I'd get to see my daughter. When I wondered if it was better for me to just kind of jump off a bridge and just disappear because then maybe all my problems would go away and then I was the source of everyone else's problems, so maybe their problems would go away. When life was like that, when I was losing, nobody was saying, you're the coolest person I know. But you know what? I took some losses. I took some L's. I came back stronger and I realized, you know what? My next enemy is not as great as my past enemy. And if I beat that, I'll beat this one. And if I won back then, I'll win this one. And so the confidence that came out of those losses, the confidence that came out of those failures, the ability to look my enemy in the eye and say, I don't care how tall you are, I don't care how big you are, I don't care what weapons you carry, you are not going to stop me because I'm going to fight for what God has purposed in my life. That's what God wants to instill in you. That's what tenacity is about. Say, I don't care who's in the way, what's in the way, what it's going to require of me. I just know that thing is going to fall before I do. You know why? Because I've been through some battles. I've fought some fights. I've taken a punch. I've taken a couple of them. And I picked myself back up and said, yeah, all right, I know what it feels like. And I know more importantly that I can get back up from it. This is why we fight. This is why that relationship's worth fighting for. This is why that destiny is worth fighting for. This is why that purpose is worth fighting for. This is why that significance, that thing that you feel like I just can't shake, I just can't let go of, and even though things don't seem to be working out right now, I know this is what God has marked me. That's why it's worth fighting for, because at the end of the day, anything worth having is worth fighting for. And if God has called you to it, if God has purposed it for you, if God has blessed you for it, if God has given it to you and said, this is yours, then you have every reason to fight for it. you have every reason to push toward it. My hope and my prayer today is that, man, this thing lights a fire in you. They say, you know what, this is what God has given to me, or this is what God has called me to, and it's worth having, which means it's worth fighting for, because nothing worth having is not worth fighting for. This is what God has destined. This is why I'll do anything and everything possible to move this church thing forward, even if it seems like, oh man, God, where do we go? What happens? Because God said, this is what you were marked for. And I've already fought 13 years like hell to get to this point today. And I didn't fight for 13 years to sit here and say, oh, well, I don't have the answers to these questions, so it's time to give up. No way. So I don't care what the enemy is. I don't care who the enemy is. I don't care what his objectives are. They're not greater than mine. He's not stronger than me. He's not going to beat me. Because like David, I'm charging full speed and saying, listen, I don't need to fight with your weapons because God has already given me the victory. And like the rest of these enemies that came before you, you too will fall. And whatever it is in your life, God has marked you for the same thing. God has called you to something in that same capacity and with that same way. And he's asking you to step up and say, listen, fight for it. Alex, fight for it. Maggie, fight for it. Mary, push for it. Don't just give up. Kelsey, don't quit on it now. Listen, fight for it because it's worth obtaining. You know what happens when you fight for it? The story concludes in this way. David killed the giant. The Philistines were in such shock, they didn't run away. They stood there dumbfounded while the other Israelite army came across this valley, across the 3/4 of a mile, running full speed with armor, all this stuff, maybe 8 minutes, 10 minutes, climbed uphill and killed that army. Because one man said it's worth fighting for. And because he fought for an entire army, found the confidence to fight for it as well. And maybe, just maybe, you might be the linchpin in your life, in your world, that says, you know what, I'm going to fight for it. And the resilience and the tenacity that you have opens up a world of opportunity for those looking in, those around you to say, you know what, if they can fight for it, then I can fight for it. And I believe that's what's going to happen when we embrace this posture in our church.
Absolutely.
So you know what, people are worth fighting for. Poor to wealthy, unknown to celebrity, doesn't matter, they're worth fighting for. And because we fight for them, other people say, yeah, I'm going to fight with you. God's call and God's purpose is worth fighting for. And so you know what? I'm going to push through the difficulty. I'm going to push through the challenge. I'm going to fight for what matters. And because you fought for other people at work, other people at school, other people in your kind of social sphere, say, you know what? If they fought for it, then I should fight for it. Because no one wants to fight or follow a leader who's not willing to fight. But someone who's willing to fight, someone who's worthy of fighting, flips the paradigm, flips the table over, where others say, yeah, I'm gonna join in with them. You know why people are leaving church? According to whatever statistics you want to follow? Because we don't fight. We become weak and passive. And we don't like following weak and passive people. We don't like being labeled weak and passive. So, nah, I just, that's for good people or whatever. Soft. Ain't no way in hell I'm being called soft. That's not changed. So with that in mind, let's stand. I'm going to close this in prayer.